All right, so I'm going to speak about the policy objectives of the PMPRB, put them into practice and into context for you. I'm going to show you a little bit of what I call how it really works, and you will conclude, no doubt, that there is an imperfect alignment, and then a few concluding remarks. So the PMPRB is about 25 years old, and you'll see the quote there from the Minister Harvey Andre back in the day, the Conservative government of Mr. Mulroney, when the PMPRB was created. And it was to ensure that consumer protection by creating a drug prices review board to monitor drug prices. So 25 years ago, it was about consumer protection. 25 years later, Supreme Court of Canada, in January of 2011, in a case looking at a decision the board made, underscored the very same thing. So 25 years later, the mandate of the board is still consumer protection, and that's the purpose. So what I'm going to do now is just speak a little bit about the challenges of consumer protection as what is fundamentally the board's mandate in a very challenging and changing reality, and also keeping in mind some of the speakers referred to the industry and the way things happen around pricing as complicated. I've chosen a slightly different word, and I've said dynamic. But I think if you keep all those things in mind, and you keep in mind the various policy levers as we go through things, the next few slides. So back in the day, 25 years ago, the policy goal was to have Canada pay never, never, never the highest prices as compared to certain comparator countries, but be somewhere in the middle. It was a very, as I like to call it, a very Canadian approach. We wanted to be middle of the road. So this is something that we monitor in our annual report every single year when we put the report out. I can't tell you where we'll be this year because we haven't completed the analysis yet, but clearly some have pointed out that we are moving away from that middle and perhaps moving into an area where perhaps Canada is paying higher prices. But having said that, it's a very dynamic marketplace, as I said, and there's a whole lot of factors at play, and you'll see with some of the actual numbers I give you that you can see that just by looking at the prices. And another thing to keep in mind, a few great things about the PMPRB is we are a national regulator, and that is to say that unlike Diane, who spoke earlier, or others, it's not just for the province, it's for every Canadian, despite who is paying, whether it's the private payers, the public payers, or the cash payers. And that, I guess, is a good thing in a conference like this. Some of the limitations, however, though, is that our mandate is to look at what is a non-excessive price. So we don't set the price, we set a ceiling. And we set a ceiling only with respect to what I call the first price into the distribution chain. 90% of the time, that's the price to the wholesaler. So we don't necessarily affect directly, although arguably very much indirectly, the prescription price, the price that someone's going to pay when they actually show up to buy their prescription from the pharmacist. So there are limitations. I was really glad to hear that Diane spoke a lot about some of the challenges around transparency, and that is a challenge for us because, as you'll see in a few minutes, what we do is we look at other prices. We do a little bit of a comparison when we set that ceiling, and if you don't know what actual price you're looking at, you have to question just how valid that comparison is. And as Diane said, it's not just nationally, but it's definitely something globally as well, which is a challenge for us as a regulator. This is something I will let you mull over in your private time, but all I really want to point out here is that the way the price tests work is to look at the therapeutic improvement that the product offers. And the theory is that with the slight or no improvement, and some people might call those Me Too's, it's supposed to be the lower of the price. And then as you offer more therapeutic improvement, a certain recognition of that. And so you would get, in theory, a higher price. And over the past number of years, that higher price has usually been the price that we would arrive at by comparing the price proposed or the price that we are examining with the international price. That would usually be the higher price or the recognition that there is innovation in that product. We do two very important things, and that is on a yearly basis, we also check the actual transaction price. So patentees have to file lots and lots of data with us, and we assess the actual transaction price. But we also have what we call the PMPRB, the golden rule. And if you remember a few minutes ago, I said that the policy objective was that we would never pay the highest price. So we have something that we call the HIPC, the highest international price comparison. And we do that at the beginning, at the introduction of the product, so looking at the introductory price, and we do it every year, because it is that test, or what I sometimes call the fence around the framework. You cannot go outside that fence. And so we do that, as I said, at the beginning, and also annually when we look at the actual transaction price. And prices are permitted to increase under the PMPRB's regime. This is a little unusual compared to other countries. Typically, there is no increase proposed at all, but you'll see that in reality it doesn't necessarily amount to that. But in theory, one of the factors that we look at and that we permit in pricing is a CPI increase on a yearly basis, more or less. So how it really works? Well, you'll recall that just in my last slide, I talked about the reward or recognition and pricing. And so if you look back in our data in 2011, we had 109 new DINs. Now those are not new chemical entities, they're new DINs, 109 of them. In that instance, the therapeutic test, or what I call the therapeutic class comparison, or what I might call the domestic test, set the price 40% of the time, even though 70% of the products were of slight or no improvement. So what you see by that is that, in fact, a lot of times the lower price is actually the comparison to the international price and not the domestic class, which is a bit surprising, and that's what I mean by a bit of an imperfect alignment. This is some real data for you, obviously not revealing the drug names for reasons of confidentiality, but what I want to do here is just show to you that pricing is a really difficult thing to get at, and I think you've heard that from a number of speakers. If you look at the MAP, the MAPP, that is what we call our ceiling price. So you can see that there's examples there, $2.45, $1.52, 65 cents, the last one being a generic example. And then you'll look at the ATP. That's the introductory price. That's the price that the patentee files to us within that about first year of introduction. And then you see the publicly available price. Those are the prices you would see by looking at the ODB formulary, IMS, other provincial formularies. And you'll see what is interesting from that is there are, in the middle, there's almost exactly what we said is the ceiling is what turns out to be the price. But if you look at the first one, we as the board had said you could price at $2.45. The real price was 68 to 69 cents. The point here is that it is a dynamic marketplace with many, many policy levers at play. We are but one. I also wanted to show you this slide and share with you a little bit on CPI. I mentioned that in theory the price can grow by CPI. What this does is it's from our own data again, so these are real numbers. And it looks at the price and the ratio of an increase in price depending on when the product was introduced. So you have some being introduced in 1995 all the way to 2010. And you can see that, in fact, most patentees do not take that CPI increase. 95% do not, in fact. So perhaps not surprisingly to the economists in the room, the pricing power, I guess, is at the introduction, and typically prices actually fall over time. I'm not going to say a whole lot about concluding remarks, only to focus on the first point in the slide and the last one. Recognizing innovation and ensuring a non-excessive price is a delicate balance. That was the policy goal of the government of the day. To my knowledge, although I'm not here to speak for Mr. Harper, it remains the policy goal of the current government. And it is a delicate balance, and it's a difficult thing to do. I don't think any of us would want to really need a medicine at some point and to find that it's not there. All of us want it to be there. We want it to be there in an affordable and accessible way. And I think that goal of affordable access and sustainability is where the opportunity for collaboration comes in, and that's the last point on this slide, that I believe that everyone in this room shares that goal, whether it's consumers, regulators, or payers. Just to close, if you have my slides electronically, and I believe you do, there are some additional slides at the back that are just intended for your personal edification. Merci beaucoup. Thank you.